Resolution. I move to suspension of the rules, immediate adoption of this resolution.
All right. Is there any objection to the suspension of the rules, the chair's reading the rules?
To stop practice of regulating electrical services to buildings for failure to meet certain specifications. Be resolved, the legislature of Alabama both houses now concurring that this body strongly request that the State Board of Health notify each turning on or off or otherwise regulating the electrical services to buildings which fail to meet health regulations concerning sewage systems or septic tanks.
What's heard, I move the adoption of the resolution. Suspension of the rules, move the adoption of the resolution. Is there any objection?
Order the Committee on Conference on Senate Bill 540, read Committee on Conference in order to reconcile the differences between the two houses concerning Senate Bill 540 have met.
School teachers and support personnel. Cause very little explanation, gentlemen, because it's the same bill, same form, same shape. It's concur in the report on the Committee on Conference. In fact, I think at this late hour, any other thing would be idiotic and
I really think we've come to the point where we're going to either have to accept and pass this, or we will have to send that in special session. And I don't think that any member of the Senate wants to do that, or any member of the House wants to do that. I tell you this, if the conference could have been, and this is it, and I hope you realize the seriousness of your vote on those matters, and I'm certainly asking you and hoping it's a real vote.
They have no objection, and I don't understand.
what objection? No objection to what, Senator?
To requiring the local school system to match.
Requires them to come up.
I know it, and that's a Senate amendment that was put on there.
I don't
understand why the Senate conferees could not have
I don't
that.
know anything about whether it's a Senate amendment. No, sir, I believe it's the original bill. This is a House bill, and I don't.
Well, let me ask you, Senator Pearson, did the Senate conferees try to remove
Us do is trying to get this out so that they can work them. They've done away with slave labor.
said earlier that this fund could be made up by federal funds? I checked with the department,
What department?
Let me finish, will you, Senator?
Wait a minute. I'm gonna let you finish. But you say you check with the department.
I'm telling you.
But tell me who. It is not. It is a certain percentage of what the lunches actually cost. Are you telling me the federal government pays the same thing in New York that it pays in Sunflower, Alabama?
I'm telling you that the federal government will not match the money that's required to make up this money that is required to be made up. And it will require that these lunchrooms be closed. And there's no way that I can vote to do that. I cannot vote for this budget if it's going to require that a large percentage of the lunchrooms in my
that district be closed. And I urge the rest of the gentlemen in this Senate to seriously consider this. I'm convinced.
That's correct.
And it makes it optional for the different school systems whether or not they want to accept this money, right?
There is an option. No, there's an option.
Oh, yeah, they don't even put appropriated for school bus drivers.
Exactly.
They need the same thing.
This morning, an argument about local control. We come forward with a bill now that allows an option for the same people you've been arguing on no bill. But anyway, you come up here and 10 minutes 12 and ask me what's that. This is the same budget that you've been dealing with. I mean, nothing else to tell you. It makes a worse his service by killing his budget than you will by passing it. It's just that simple. Then you're going to be back here. The governor going to have you back.
We begin this week's edition of Composite on a musical note, which might appear unusual since our first subject deals with the deaf. But much to my surprise, and perhaps to many of you, the deaf people like to sing and do sing in their own way when plenty of communication takes place. Those who hear made the sounds. No sound passed the lips of the deaf. But Lawrence Barclay, who works with the deaf at Lakewood Church of Christ in Montgomery, says the satisfaction or enjoyment of singing comes through the facial expressions and sign language used by an interpreter. Charles Riles, a supervisor for Alabama Rehabilitation Services, says deaf people enjoy music when he or she is able to express the feelings of a song.
In sign language. These groups who have accepted the deaf into the general worship service have an interpreter who interprets in sign language everything that's said and done verbally. And the singing is a part of the worship service. And of course it's a little difficult for us to understand how singing can be done manually, but the words carry a great meaning.
This is a group of people who can hear. Our time will not be spent on the singing aspects in the life of those who are deaf, but our intent is to show you some of the happenings and goings-on in the world of those who can't hear. Those who hear, like this small class, shows a growing concern for those who can't hear, and classes are being conducted in numerous areas throughout the city and the state for this express purpose.
In the position that you hold, do you find that the hearing are impatient with the deaf?
No, I think there's no doubt about it. They're impatient, and we are sometimes frightened of the deaf. Has not in the past been uncommon to avoid deaf people. It's difficult to approach someone that you can't communicate with, and especially the deaf group who use a language that is so obvious it sometimes is embarrassing. I think this is changing, though. There is an acceptance about today that has not been previously, because there is an interest on the part of many to learn the language. There are classes. Many churches have sign language classes, and there are people who are willing to go and spend their time to learn how to communicate with these people, and the deaf appreciate it. They have been in isolation a long time, and this provides them an opportunity to know what other people are thinking and what the hearing world is doing. There are a number of classes provided for those who are interested in communicating and talking to the deaf with sign language and finger spelling. There are a number of municipalities that are providing services for the deaf that were never before available to them.
The deaf enjoy TV, and they are interested in what is behind the workings of TV. That was the purpose of a recent tour through our studios by a group of pupils from the School for the Deaf at Talladega. Deaf people, young and old, must rely on the electronic media for much of their information. There are a limited number of newscasts that include captioned items in the newscast. PBS is the pioneer in this respect. It's important that weather or disaster warnings be transmitted to those who can't hear as well as those who can. Some commercial messages are now aimed at the deaf. Unfortunately, some of the aids being used by the media to communicate with the deaf are objected to by some of those who hear.
There's so much more being done now than ever before. You see now, not infrequently, a little inset in the TV screen, someone interpreting for the deaf. And this has made TV accessible to the deaf, and they use it.
Has this not become aggravating to some of us who hear?
Yes, I understand that there are some who complain about having that inset there because it's distracting, and that's unfortunate.
Without special assistance, deaf people are unable to use a standard telephone. For the majority of them, telephone usage involves the assistance of a hearing family member, a neighbor, or associate. However, several special techniques and special devices make the telephone accessible to deaf people. A major breakthrough is what is referred to as TTY, which permits the attachment of keyboard devices to the standard telephone receiver. This is the portable model that can be used at home or on the road. Some models are old teletype machines once used by Western Union. The old machine is cheaper, but it's becoming scarce. David Richardson, who heads the deaf missionary mission work for the Alabama Baptists, is well involved in the deaf program, and he has a good explanation of how it works during this demonstration of a two-way communications between his home and the office of Earl Lindsay, Superintendent for the Deaf at the Alabama Rehab Office.
This machine operates by electricity or battery. This is connected up by electricity, and you turn the machine on, and in order to call a deaf person, you dial the number of a person who also has one of these machines. And after dialing the number of a deaf person, you put it in the cradle of this little machine. A deaf person, when they answer the phone, will give their name, whoever they are, and they say, like, Ruth, here, go ahead. And I know that a deaf person has answered the phone, that they are waiting for me to respond, and then I will talk to them and give a message to that person of whatever I would like to tell them. So we are able to communicate with these machines through a telephone. And this has opened up a new world for deaf people. To be able to call the emergency number at the police station in case they need help, or whatever the situation might be. If a deaf person needs to call someone, if they have one of these phones, then they can communicate with them. So this machine is helping to overcome the communication barrier that deaf people face in a hearing world.
The American Heart Association, interested in the deaf, wants them to know about CPR, cardiac pulmonary resuscitation. And the association is now conducting classes in Montgomery to teach deaf people how to administer CPR and to recognize the signs of a heart attack. So where do you begin and where do you end in a limited period of time like this to discuss what is being done and what can still be done for those who cannot hear? Every day there are more and more special techniques and special devices being improved upon for some 234,000 Alabamians who have a hearing loss to some degree, and 4,000 of these who are totally deaf. This is where we began some few short minutes ago. This would make a good ending.
Those of you that'll be here for the next 40 years, you will never, ever pass a perfect budget. I represent the largest school district in the entire state, 65,000 students. Our lunchroom workers, which is the main bone of contention here, Our payroll runs $3 million a year. It's conceivable that we may have to increase the lunchroom prices somewhat. It's conceivable that we may have to lay off some of these people, but they're going to get there.
Mr. President. All right, Senator Proctor. Mr. President, gentlemen of the Senate, look it up and about, that we must have given every individual in this state a pay raise. And probably next session, maybe we won't have anybody to give a pay raise to. But I think we need to start thinking about something. We say, I hope that you'll start thinking about some solution to this thing so that the teachers who are professionals, the conferees, the lieutenant governor, and a lot of other people in this body have worked along with it.
Go ahead, Senator Hall.
Is it the intent of the $800 for the lunchroom worker?
Mike, correct me, somewhere around $4,200.
All right.
You didn't want to know all things, that's a big budget, but we give a 16-cent raise and now assume that you gave some raises. What percent raises did the universities get?
Various amounts.
From a low to a high, Senator.
Oh, I said from 8% from me, how much Florida State got.
How much did the University of Alabama get overall?
I wouldn't want to cite anything.
Just a round figure. I mean, I'm not to the penny.
I can't give you a round figure. You know the thing about it, Senator,